Fireworks have lit up the sky in the US to mark the nation's 245th birthday. July 4 celebrations were eagerly held this year after almost all were cancelled in 2020. The White House hosted 1,000 guests for burgers and a light show, including essential workers and military families. It's expected to be the busiest July 4th in history. 43.6 million people out on the roads. President Joe Biden has used his Independence Day address to praise those on the front line of the battle against COVID-19.
Today, we are closer than ever to declaring our independence from a deadly virus. That's not to say the battle against COVID-19 is over. We've got a lot more work to do. But just as our declaration in 1776 was a call to action, not a reason for complacency or a claim of victory. It was a call to action. The same is true today. Back then, we had the power of an idea on our side. Today, we have the power of science.
Joining me now, Mr Jackman, CEO of the US Studies Centre. Simon, thanks for your time. Interesting rhetoric, if you like, thoughts of Joe Biden there. The US has gained the upper hand on COVID. Look, he's not saying mission accomplished, but is it true? Do we feel like the US is now gaining the upper hand?
Tom, this summer represents a bit of a return to situation normal for men in the US who have suffered through, like the rest of us, 18 months, but as we all know, with far more dire consequences in the United States. The idea that they're coming out with high vaccination rates now, up in the 60% range of adult Americans vaccinated, as they are in their traditional summer period, and Americans take summer, like we do in Australia, they take summer very seriously. That is giving Biden an awful lot of tailwinds. He's able to make speeches like that, picking up the independence thing, and asserting America's independence from the vaccine. But at the same time, he's got to caution they're not there quite yet. Like here in Australia, the Delta variant is the variant that they're concerned about. It's an incredibly transmissible variant of the virus. And while 60% and perhaps a little north of that is a very great place to be in, it's not quite at the level that any epidemiologist that I'm following or reading thinks is sufficient to declare herd immunity. And of course, Tom, last observation on this is that the thing we always have to keep in mind about the United States is the remarkable heterogeneity of the place, that while that 60% and just north of that might be an overall number, there are real pockets where vaccine take-up is much, much lower than that. And they remain real issues of concern, particularly as the Delta variant is circulating.
Right, so you mentioned there the difficulty in getting certain parts vaccinated. I wonder, he's missed this target. We should stress that. So this is the first vaccine target he's missed. He wanted 70% first doses. By now he got to 66. It's still pretty high. I mean, this is a country with all sorts of wild views, frankly, that go on that make it difficult to get a high rate. 66 at this point. I mean, if you went back at the start of the year, you would have taken this in a heartbeat, right?
Absolutely, Tom. Absolutely. And I think that's what gave them confidence that they might get there. I think they realised they probably were not going to get there. They saw the numbers start to taper out a little bit. But Tom, a theme we've talked about before, Byron inherits sort of the reaps the benefits politically, and the nation reaps the benefits substantively of that throw everything against the wall strategy that was in the Trump administration's Project Lightspeed, that Jared Kushner had carriage of, that got the American pharmaceutical and the medical scientific complex up and running. And there are, 4 or 5 vaccines available to the American people. And then, of course, with the new administration, a lot of political goodwill and leadership from the top. And then this other amazing facet of the United States kicks in, and that is logistics capability. It can manufacture, distribute, and use its deep, the state and local governments to make sure the vaccine got out into people's arms, albeit, Tom, as we just acknowledged, with some evenness across different parts of the country.
So amidst all of this approval rating, I know we're not meant to be slavish to the polls anymore, but 55%. Are we still in the honeymoon? He inherited the presidency at a time when the vaccine sort of, rollout was starting to kick goals anyway. Is this, he needs to sort of take stock, not take this for granted. This 55%, I mean, what do you think it represents?
Look, it's a really interesting to hear you use the word honeymoon, Tom. I think that's interesting. Is COVID and the recovery from it, and as I was saying earlier, this, thank heavens it's summer and we can kind of get back to having what Americans normally associate summer being, time with family, outdoors, relaxation. Is that prolonging a honeymoon for Joe Biden? I think the answer is probably yes. He has had some rebuffs in Congress. They seem to be not the dominant story, not what people are talking about in the main, in average, everyday American public opinion, as closely as we may track what's going on Capitol Hill. The story is still one of generally an economic recovery and a public health recovery. And of course, those two go together, giving this sense of an extended presidential honeymoon. Now, what are we coming up on? It'll be 6 months later this month that he's been in office, which you would say in the ordinary course of things is a longer than normal honeymoon. But I think there's some very specific factors that explains it. By the way, that approval number tracking roughly about 18 points higher than where Donald Trump was at the same time of Trump's presidency.
It's a decent chunk. Just finally and briefly, I'm casting way ahead because we can afford to do that. Is there a chance that Joe Biden becomes almost like a wartime president? That if he gets through COVID and then people are not too inspired, I mean, we assume he's a good chance of not even running again, but people will be happy ditching him and even ditching the party because they say, that was great, we needed someone calm, we got through that, what have we got next?
I don't think he's a wartime president, he's the wartime recovery president. It's more like... Truman was the president in place when and made the decision to deploy the atomic weapons that brought the war to an end. And so Truman himself was very much a wartime president, but the bulk of the Truman presidency was in the recovery. And that's the analogy I think of, and a few of us American politics and history tragics at the US Studies Center, that's perhaps the analogy that I'm thinking of. Sort of a plain-spoken, from a small to medium town, Scranton isn't quite Independence, Missouri, and 1948 is not 2020 by any means, but there are some parallels there.
He does love talking about Scranton. We'll have to leave it there. Simon Jackman, thank you as ever.